Hey, this is Brian Trasher, and welcome to another edition of Laws and Sausage TV, where we take you inside the sausage maker so you can see how things are really done behind the scenes of government. How do we do that? Well, we bypass the partisan jargon of cable news and talk directly to the movers, shakers, and newsmakers who are on the public policy front lines from the state capitals to Capitol Hill. Now, as you know, Laws and Sausage TV is the only talk show dedicated to public policy professionals. One of the ways that we all stay connected is through a U.S. government relations group on LinkedIn, which now has over 50,000 members. And I'm very excited today to welcome the founder and administrator of that group, Jeffrey Taylor. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Brian.
So Jeff, you're the managing partner at USGRI in Washington, D.C., but you also started this online community for lobbyists on LinkedIn, and at last count, the membership was over 54,000. How did you get the idea to start that group, and how did you grow it so large?
Yeah, I had a friend who actually worked for townhall.com over at the Heritage Foundation, and he tried to convince me that LinkedIn was the way to go. And, I was in my mid-40s by that time, so I wasn't quite used to things like Facebook and LinkedIn, but he convinced me, and sooner or later I started the group on LinkedIn. We went slow at first, 100 people joining, 300, but after about 2 or 3 years, it really bucked up, 12,000, 23,000. And at one point, it looked like some of the international government affairs, public affairs types were bowing out because it was so U.S.-centric. So I started an international government relations LinkedIn site too, and now that has vaulted past the U.S. government one. Now we have like 60,000 on the international government affairs site. So it's been very good for LinkedIn and I think people in our industry space.
Well, yeah, it's a great way to see what everybody else is up to and a great place to network and share ideas. So thank you very much. So Jeff, you and I were talking about a project you're working on with some folks that do mergers and acquisitions for a living, and you were telling me that they are falling under the same regulations and fees as security firms under the DoddFrank Act. And now you've had some success getting legislation passed through the House unanimously, only to see it stall in the Senate. What do you think the holdup is?
Well, the holdup, I think, is kind of a breakdown in comedy, COMITY, here in Washington, a friendliness, a trust. The two parties have really dug in, and a lot of good legislation is put on the sidelines. This is a situation where, with Dodd-Frank, even mom and pop financial services, the local small businessmen and women who do small financial services, not securities like on Wall Street, but the selling of a local candy store or a local bookstore, and all of those kinds of people were caught up in this Dodd-Frank. So we went to Congress, talked to Jeb Hensarling, the chairman of the Banking Committee, a conservative, and Maxine Waters, the ranking member on the Financial Services Committee, let's face it, a liberal. And the two of them agreed on this one subject, that you need to allow these people a little relief from Dodd-Frank. So we got a bill passed. By the way, this is the second time we got a bill passed, about 426-0 in the House. The first time it stalled in the Senate, and right now it's kind of stalled in the Senate too. So the theory here is if you can't get a small bill that has got unanimous support in the House through the Senate, what can we get through the Senate? And so we're working very hard right now with both the House and the Senate. There are a couple of financial services bills moving, and maybe we can get this unanimous bill put in one of those bills. So, but it is frustrating. And in the olden days, when I came to Capitol Hill in the 80s, we wouldn't have even be thinking twice if a bill made it through the Senate or the House unanimously. Those are the kind of things that you get off the desk quite quickly. But here we are in 2018, and we're quibbling over something that has unanimous support from conservatives and liberals. And so, we keep the fight going.
Well, you're right. It is rare to get a unanimous vote in the House unless it's to rename a post office or something. To what do you credit your success in getting that unanimous vote in the House? Was it because of the two high-profile sponsors, bipartisan sponsors, who latched onto the bill?
Well, Maxine Waters didn't latch on right away. And in fact, when we made it through the committee, it was still a bipartisan bill. I think it was split right down the middle. Although you could tell that there were a number of Democrats on the committee that liked the bill, but it needed some correction. And at that point, that's when lobbyists come in and say, okay, uh, Congresswoman Waters, uh, this really is dead in the Senate if we don't have some kind of bipartisan support in the House. And so we sat down with her team and said, all right, let's go through the bill line by line, and we'll bring in our experts and you bring in your experts, and let's really tear this thing apart. Obviously, we can't bring Democrats on if we all of a sudden all equally lose Republicans. So where can we find that sweet spot? And her staff was very accommodating. Here are the three areas, Jeffrey. What can you do that doesn't, harm the overall bill? And we were able to tweak each of these areas. And at the end of the day, to Congresswoman Waters' credit, she said, done. That's a good bill now. We went to the floor. Mrs. Waters spoke on behalf of the bill. Chairman Henseling spoke on behalf of the bill, and boom, 426-0. It can still be done. You can still find the happy medium. The problem is it's much more difficult in the Senate. Everybody thinks that the House is the more partisan. In fact, there are a lot of bills going from the House to the Senate. It's in the Senate where things are not even getting hearings and trying to get to the floor of the Senate for a vote. And I think part of that is the mismanagement of Senator Chuck Schumer, who has told all of the Democratic senators, we are the resistance. We are not going to proceed. And boy, when you start with a premise like that, it's hard to get things even to the batter's box in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, well, nicely done, though, by the way. What organizations have you been able to recruit to get behind your bill? And are there any that are in opposition to it that you think might be contributing to the overall resistance in the Senate?
Right, right. Well, again, that's the other thing, trying to get on try to get support for your bill from the industry associations and the think tanks that weigh in on these kinds of things. Early on, we had, the more free market, free market like the Chamber of Commerce and other financial services groups. But a little later in the process, we also had on a group that is considered left of center, the National State Securities Secretaries Association, called NASA. And the minute they came on the bill, Katie barred the door. All of a sudden, a number of Democrats had to say, well, if they're on the bill, there must be some merit here. And that's actually when we started to have more dialogue on the left, trying to make this a bipartisan bill. I understand the Republicans in the Senate wanting to have something bipartisan that they can move forward with. But sometimes there are good bills that happen to be partisan. And at that point, it's a question of you do have the votes, you do have the majority. We can try to make this bipartisan as much as we can, but sometimes it won't be. You need to move forward. But in this circumstance, we've been with NASA coming on board. When you have NASA and the U.S. Chamber, you're now covering the waterfront on the political spectrum. And we were able to move forward. There are some people like Senator Warren that you will never get because they believe in, highly regulating the financial services. And you can talk to Senator Warren and her colleagues all you want. You kind of know at the end of the day, we tried, but we know we'll never get there. But there are others like Senator Heitkamp, Senator Donnelly, Senator Warren that there's a good chance because they're pro-business Democrats that maybe we can get them on board. And then once we get one or two on board, others will come on board because they trust their judgment. So it's all putting a puzzle together. And you're absolutely right, finding the outside interests that are trusting to Democrats and are trusting to Republicans. And we were able to do that.
Well, again, nice work, and there's some good lessons there about getting those trade associations on board. A lot of people sometimes will complain that they call everything special interest, and that's a pretty broad brush to paint with. But a lot of times they can be very good allies in helping you get over that hump with certain members or certain committees. So nice work there. Well, Jeff, you pretty well explained your strategy thus far. How do you think you're going to spend the rest of 2018 to try to keep your bill moving forward and, in an election year, get something done before the next Congress takes over?
Well, what we're hopeful is that the Senate Banking Committee actually did pass a bill recently. It had come over from the House. It's Bill S2155. And that is a compendium of a lot of bills, securities bills. And so ours is not in that bill. But what the Senate did was it made changes to the original House bill. So when the Senate passes a bill like that, it has to go back to the House because both bills have to be absolutely spot on identical. And so now that it's back in the House, we're going back to Senator Jeb Hensarling and some of the other members and say, listen, in the intervening months, we passed a 426-0 bill. How about putting our bill into the bigger 2155? And so based on all of the interaction we have so far, they're seriously considering that. They're seriously considering putting one or two bills that passed over the last 4 or 5 months into 2155. They'll put it into 2155, send it back to the Senate, and hopefully at that point, the Republicans and Democrats in the Senate will say, well, good grief, these are all unanimous votes. There really is nothing contentious here. So, okay, we will now pass the revised 2155, which actually has our bill 477 in it, and we're in good shape at that point. So those are the kind of negotiations that are going on right now, putting our smaller bill into the larger bill going. And so we'll keep up that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and piggybacking is also a very good strategy when sometimes your particular instrument stalls or meets with some resistance. A lot of times you can get it thrown into something that has a lot more momentum and is in a posture to pass. Also, you mentioned the bills in the Senate having to look exactly like the bills in the House, and that is a good lesson there too, because a lot of people hear the word reconciliation on the news. They don't really know what it means, but it can mean the difference between having to get 51 votes in the Senate or 60 votes in the Senate. So again, good strategy there, and sounds like you're in good shape, and good luck to you with that. Jeff, I appreciate you joining us today in the Sausage Maker. We look forward to seeing you in the LinkedIn Government Affairs group, and let's get you back on the show soon for an update.
Very kind, Brian. Enjoy doing it. Thank you.
Well, folks, that does it for another edition of Laws and Sausage TV. I want to thank Jeff Taylor for dropping in, and please follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and feel free to leave your comments below. Remember, if you're a government affairs professional and you would like to come on the Laws and Sausage TV show and tell your story, reach out to us on whatever platform you're watching on and give us your information. Thanks, everybody, for watching. This is Brian Trasher signing off for Laws and Sausage TV. See you next time.